sup? I'm reliably informed that I'm terrible at pimping my stuff, so here I am, pimping my stuff. You can buy most of the shit that I make over at post-mort.com. Hope to see you there. Hello, I thought I'd do this in a quick and dirty way. I will strive mightily to be as fair as possible, but I do have an innate and inherent bias against the Tory party. I grew up in Thatcher's Britain. So I have very little sympathy for the Conservatives and everything that they have done to British society. In particular, I have very little sympathy for Boris Johnson and everything he is in the process of doing non-consensually to British society. So, I mean, that they're already shown to be lying when it comes to their promises about NHS nurses. Whereas I think Labour isn't lying, they're just naive and a little too optimistic. And frankly, I would rather that, though I'm by no means a Labour man either. Our whole political system is broken and needs fixing. So, with a nose for some reason resembling a Tumblr drawing of myself, I will now attempt to dig into the Conservative Party Manifesto and give you my views on it and its highlights. This is being recorded live and then going out with very, very minimal editing, so excuse my stumbling. Unleash Britain's potential. Well, there's a problem from the start. Brexit is going to massively constrict our potential, not make it any better. It's an incredible narrowing. So, and get Brexit done? No. Right? Even if he does manage to get some kind of deal or whatever else over the line, if he does get a majority, which you're fucking stupid if you're voting for them, but I will have to just deal with it and rub your noses in your own mess the entire time. But even if he does, that's not Brexit done. Right? Deals, trade deals, agreements, negotiations, this is the beginning. Right? This is the end of the beginning. It's not even the beginning of the end. So the idea of get Brexit done is laughable. The idea of unleash Britain's potential is laughable on its face. And it says the Conservative and Unionist Party, when the policies and so on outlined in here and what they've done with Brexit is extremely likely to break up the union. So it takes some big brass balls to have a Unionist Party on there at the moment. Boris gives a guarantee that's not worth the pixels it's written on, because the man lies constantly and breaks every promise he's ever made. We can skip over the introduction, not interested. Get Brexit done. Well, I've already gone over that, right? This isn't the end of the beginning. It's not even the beginning of the end. There is no moving on. Brexit will be dominating our politics for at least 10 years or more. Right? Why? And he says no more renegotiations. Okay, well, that's not helpful. No more referendums. Problem: the original referendum was illegal. The High Court agrees that this is the case and ruled it to be so, but can't overturn the result because it was non-binding and considered only advisory. So it's not even a matter of following the referendum, because if they considered the referendum binding, then it should have been overturned. No, this is the government choosing to use the result of a narrow victory in a corrupt referendum, marred by disinformation, illegality, and data misuse, to excuse their far-right policy of breaking out of the EU, which will massively harm this country. And what money would you lay on the fact they're going to blame the EU moving forward? Like I said, I can't be neutral on this. There is no neutral on this. There was illegality. It was illegitimate. It was only ever advisory. These are facts, not matters of opinion, and facts confirmed by the courts. So they're playing the Democrat here. There is no majority for Brexit anymore of any kind, and particularly when you go to a harder Brexit, which still is much more likely under the Tories, support drops to a third. So, and look, here's the list of bullshit that people are still repeating. Take back control of our laws. We always had control of our laws, right? And we participated in lawmaking in the EU. So we always had control of our laws there anyway, and vetoes on a lot of areas. Take back control of our money. We always had control of our money. What went to the EU was a fraction, a tiny sliver of the overall UK economy. It's nothing, right? And we got a lot of that back, and we got a say in how that was all used, and a lot of it came back to our most deprived areas. Do you really think the government is going to compensate those deprived areas for the money they're losing from the EU grants and assistance? I roll to disbelieve on that one. Control our own trade policy. We largely had control over our own trade policy, but it was advantageous being part of the EU, because the big deals that the EU did internationally were on more favourable terms, because the EU as a bloc had a lot more say, a lot more sway, a lot more strength going into these negotiations. When we go into negotiations now, it's going to be as a beggared and humiliated nation with no clout. So, Australian-style points-based immigration system. Ask the Australians how well that's going. Raise standards in areas like workers' rights, welfare, agriculture and the environment. It's the Conservative Party. When was the last time they did something to aid workers' rights? Of course, they do the old switcheroo where they try to claim things like zero-hour contracts are better and are about workers' rights. Animal welfare, they still want to bring back fox hunting and cull badgers and all kinds of other stuff. And they don't care about agriculture. And they certainly don't care about the environment, though for some reason they're trumpeting their supposed achievements when there haven't really been any. Ensure we're in full control of our fishing waters. Fishermen. Fishing accounts for 0.1%, less than 0.1% of the UK economy. Right? Services accounts for, I think it's well over a quarter, possibly over a third of the UK economy. Fishing, yeah, might be better, but these are deals that still need to be hammered out. So fishing issues might improve, but services are going to be hammered by Brexit. So just as a sheer matter of brute mathematics, what makes better sense? To aid 0.1% of the economy while harming at least a quarter of the economy, or not? Not doing that. Which makes more sense? They think they can negotiate a trade agreement in 1 year. That is not going to happen. The EU negotiators say there is absolutely no way in their wildest dreams that this would ever be accomplished within a year. So we have that grace period where we're still under UK law and everything. We're still going to take damage like we already have been. And then they want a trade deal at the end of that, which isn't going to happen. So the only honest, forthright thing here is the only way to get Brexit is with a Conservative majority in Parliament. So we can only hope that tactical voting and so on keeps them out. Vote for Corbyn as a vote for chaos? Possibly. It'd be more delay, more problems. But we might get a legitimate referendum to confirm, which lest we forget was one of Jacob Rees-Mogg's ideas way back when, to have a confirmatory referendum and full informed consent. And that, I think that's a basic. And if they think they can win it, if they do think this is genuinely the will of the people, why are they so afraid of a second referendum? Who fucking knows? Unleash British potential, they say. Unleash Britain's potential. They say they've spent 9 years cleaning up Labour's mess. Well, actually, they've been making a mess. Austerity didn't work, but they stuck with it. Did untold harm. Labour invested massively in Britain's infrastructure. For all that there were problems with Blair, they at least staved off some of the harm and fixed some of the damage the Conservatives had done. But now they've been in power for a long time. And how they can blame anybody else for the things that they've caused, I don't know. And Cameron talked about investing in technology and so on, but it didn't really emerge. Conservatives have a long history of failing to invest in the things that make Britain money. Arts, design, entertainment, innovative technology and engineering. These are things traditionally we've been very good at, but what tends to happen is we develop the ideas and then they leave the country and get developed by somebody else. And a large part of that is down to the problems that the Conservatives have caused, not anybody else. they talk about the unemployment rate, but they don't seem to be calculating the job losses and so on due to Brexit and the fact that so many companies are moving out and what's going to happen when these car plants and so on shut down. Now, they have raised the allowance for tax at the lower level, but that is good. But the trouble is, I mean, later on in this, they sort of talk about how they're not going to be raising taxes. But if you want to fix a lot of the damage that they've done over the past 9 years, it has to mean more taxation. I mean, that's just an honest requirement. Even just stopping austerity means we pick up where we left off in 2008, right? It doesn't actually mean anything improves. So we've got to raise more money to invest and to catch up to where we should be. So if they're not raising tax, fiddling here and there, little bits here and there, it just isn't going to do it, right? And they're still talking about fiscal responsibility, but you have to spend money to make money. You have to invest socially. And austerity hasn't done it. The deficit has gone up consistently under austerity. So they haven't even managed to pay anything down. Whereas if we'd invested and we'd made more money, we might be doing better off. I can't be neutral on this. I mean, these are just facts. There's no way around it. We will focus on your priorities. No, you won't. They're not going to strengthen the NHS. Like I said at the start, they talk about 50,000 new nurses. Nope, that includes them supposedly persuading about 20,000 of that 50,000 to stay, and the money that they've pledged is not enough to get the extra nurses that they talk about. They also talk about the hospital building program, but that was already exposed even before the election as being complete nonsense. So it's just more interference, more pointless layers of bureaucracy and management selling off the NHS. Even if they say otherwise, we know it's gonna happen. And because spending has been frozen, even raising funds for the NHS isn't going to offset the damage that has been done. So here's the plan: 50,000 more nurses, right? Well, we already know that's bullshit. 6,000 more doctors. Where are they going to come from? Takes a while to train new doctors, and we've already got a shortfall. Improve staff morale. A Conservative government will not improve staff morale in any way. Here's the thing, right? So many people who voted for Brexit did so because they don't like immigrants for one reason or another. But about 13%, if I remember rightly from looking up earlier, about 13% of NHS staff are immigrants. It's much higher in city areas than it is elsewhere. But it's a good chunk, right? And we already have a shortfall even with that many immigrants. And about 5 to 6%, so, half to a third of those immigrant workers in the NHS are from the EU. Those are the people we're going to lose, right? So we're going to have to make up the shortfall somewhere. They're not going to be able to make it up in any kind of decent amount of time through training or incentives, even if they restored nursing bursaries or whatever. We were still having a problem even when they were there. So we're going to have this massive shortfall. So how do they propose to solve this problem? More immigration, just from outside the EU. So they can introduce an NHS visa, which will ensure that we get more people from outside the UK coming in and working in the NHS. So if you vote Tory, if you vote Brexit because you don't like immigrants, you're going to see a sharp uptick in non-European immigrants, which I imagine you would dislike more than EU immigrants. And on a financial basis, EU immigrants pay in about 1.6 times as much in tax and so on than they take out, taken as a whole, whereas non-EU migrants, it's only something like 1.1. So it's a net gain both ways, but we gain a lot more by EU migrants coming into the UK. So if you're expecting to see less immigrants, good luck with that one. I mean, what more can you say, really? And they want to review doctors. Well, there are problems with doctors. This might help, but I suspect that's a middle class appeal. An NHS nurse standing as a Conservative Party candidate, just when people talk about internalised misogyny, Or internalised racism. This makes me think of that, but genuine. Why would you stand? Who knows? Maybe they're a fifth columnist. New treatments are expensive and they're not really providing enough funding to cover that. Treat mental health with the same urgency as physical health. You've been saying that for a while, but you haven't been. And the whole system, particularly the welfare system, treats us like scum. There's no promise for that to change. Anything else worth picking out here? A lot of this is just empty promises with nothing to back it up. Labour, Lib Dems and others at least have talked about money in a more convincing way. And this is all... I mean, the Conservative Manifesto is basically more of the same, really, and them easing off slightly, not choking you quite so hard. That's really about all there is. Everyone's focused on social care, but the Conservatives don't really talk about how they're going to do anything to do with money that way. Whereas, to compare with the Labour one, they were talking about granting a JSA equivalent to people who are carers, and increasing the amount in the caring profession. The caring profession, incidentally, is another area in which a lot of immigrants work. So if you crack down on immigration, you're going to lose carers, which means you're not going to have as much support. £1 billion of extra funding for social care sounds like a lot. Isn't, when you consider the ageing population and so on. Needs to be more. But again, they're talking about not really increasing taxes. Investing in our schools. The Tories have brought back a three-tier education system, really. Comprehensive, grammar, private. Not helpful. And their idea of good schooling is learn by rote, reading, writing, arithmetic, less arts, a lot more vocational training. Now, I do think we need vocational training, but I think it should be an option. Whereas the Conservatives seem to see schools as corporate recruitment centres more than anything else. So they're looking for skills for work, not skills for life. And given how rapidly technology changes, I think we need to shift our thinking on education from learning by rote to learning how to learn, if you follow. I mean, they say they're going to invest in arts, music and sport. Sport they probably might. The rest, no. I just don't see it happening. This just all seems like bluster and nonsense. I mean, look at their track record on these things. Support for working families. If this is true, this would be a good thing. What are they? Okay, so the personal allowance on tax. Yeah, it's okay, but that's kind of already there, and they're not really talking about changing it that much. National living wage. Now, that doesn't actually help that much. The minimum wage is what helps. So the living wage would be $10.50 an hour, but that doesn't really mean anything because it's the minimum wage that matters, and that's £7 something. Whereas Labour talk about setting the minimum wage to £10 an hour. They say they're going to create more jobs. Not sure how they're going to do that with all the businesses fleeing to the continent and everything else. Okay, so they say they're not going to raise the rates of income tax, national insurance or VAT. Okay, and this, how do you pay for transformative policies and change if you don't raise tax? So everything that they seem to be promising just seems to be returning the spending levels to how they were when the financial crash hit, perhaps a bit below, which means we're lagging behind where we should be in terms of investment in all these services, and yet they will praise us, oh, we've increased spending. Well, no, you haven't. Inflation has happened, and you've given us an extra pittance, which hasn't made up the difference. They also say they want to cut taxes. We need tax to fund all these things. Not that they're offering much in the way of things, but at least be honest about it. And if we lower tax, we're going to have less money for services and things that we need. So they talk about childcare, which is a heavy thing, same as caring is. Saying they want to give parents freedom, support, and choice. A £1 billion fund. Again, that's not actually that much money once you spread it around. to help create more high-quality, affordable childcare. Not free, affordable. And we know what the Conservative Party concept of affordable is. At least when it comes to homes, that's 80% of market value, which isn't affordable. Energy costs are a problem. They do talk about grants and the ability to apply for more insulation and so on, whereas Labour and the Green Party and others talk about just giving people the extra insulation and stuff in their homes to make them more energy efficient. We've had various schemes like this under the Conservatives. I've talked about them before on streams and things, and they're a nightmare to book, to get done, and to get any follow-through on, because the companies only want to do it if there's a profit, and usually it's only partial funding towards getting something done. And if you're impoverished, even a half-price boiler replacement, you're looking at a couple of grand, and it's just not viable. So we will use our freedom from the EU to improve the UK's tax regime, not least by abolishing the tampon tax. This is a weird thing to see in a Conservative manifesto. You could do that anyway. The EU is not preventing you from doing that. And as I love to point out whenever this comes up, toilet paper is considered a luxury and VAT is charged on it. Here's the crux of it. I mean, they actually put this in their manifesto. We as Conservatives believe that everyone who can work should work. And that has historically meant people with stage 4 cancer, people with crippling social anxiety, people with no limbs. They consider all of these people fit to work because there's an incentive to consider them fit for work. So they're going to continue to roll out the disastrous universal credit, which in theory is a good thing, but in practice is being used to choke people's benefits off. Abandon that. That would be a popular thing to do. Just say, right, it's not working and it's causing problems. And okay, here also they say, at the same time, make sure those who cheat the system by committing benefit fraud are punished. Okay, we don't want anyone to cheat, and it is a waste of money, them cheating, but it costs more to pursue benefit cheats than is recouped from them or prevented. It's just not economic sense to do so. Very, very, very few people cheat the benefit system. Hardly any. And they're not typically caught in the ways that they're talking about. They're appealing to your lower, baser nature when they do this. We must punish people. And it contributes to this idea that anyone on benefits for health or whatever or other reasons must be a scrounger of some kind, which just isn't true. So that contributes to a hostile atmosphere and hatred towards people who have disabilities or mental problems or whatever else. Talk about making our country safer. They want to recruit 20,000 new police officers. This is another arena in which we find it very hard to recruit people. Right? Very, very hard to find enough people to do it. And part of that's to do with freezes and conflict between the government and the police service and so on. Where are they going to get these 20,000 new police? Plus, again, as I like pointing out whenever policing comes up, bobbies on the beat, police in cars, patrolling and so on is one of the least efficient and least effective things that you can do to improve security, to improve police response times and so on. You need responders, and it makes much more sense to invest in things like public surveillance, stuff like that. I know that sounds sinister, but I mean like CCTV monitoring in hotspot areas, stuff like that. A policeman wandering around is really unlikely to find anyone committing a crime. It hardly ever happens. So you really need to concentrate on the investigative side and the surveillance side. They talk about the need for a fair justice system, but they've removed rights to free legal representation or subsidised legal representation from a bunch of people. So when they talk about a fair justice system, they apparently mean a fair justice system for people who can afford it. It's just all lies, and it's really pissing me off. Drug addiction. They want to stick to this outdated paradigm of treating it as more of a criminal problem than a health problem. They kind of weasel word it here, but whereas the other parties are, at least while they're out of power, acknowledging that we need a different approach to discipline and enforcement and punishment. That's the angle they take on everything, but we know statistically that these are the least effective ways to go about things. So why do it in defiance of statistics? Because the public doesn't know, whereas you should be leading and saying, look, this drug problem we're having, it's not really a criminal issue, it's a health issue. So if we tackle it as a health issue, we should lead to better outcomes, get people more off drugs, reduce demand and so on, and that's a better way to go about it than kicking indoors and giving someone a criminal record for having a tenth of weed in their back pocket. Yeah, it's just... At least they're talking about putting body cams on police. That's a good thing, though they do conveniently seem to switch off wherever they've been deployed. Emphasis on supporting victims of crime, again, rather than prevention and so on. It's much more about... The Conservative approach to law and order is always much more about revenge than anything else. Fix our immigration system. We have always had the capacity to have a tighter immigration system. You've chosen not to do it, and to blame the EU for it when it's nothing to do with them. And now, in their manifesto, they're characterising this as having been an EU problem. And I guess they're hoping to ride a wave of anti-immigrant sentiment to bring in even more swinging immigration laws than already existed. But as we've already seen, there's a contradiction there, because they want to grant more visas to non-EU people to come in to work in the NHS and so on. You can't have your cake and eat it too. And why do we want, from their own sort of paradigm, from their own point of view, why would you want the least effective, least financially viable people to immigrate more rather than the Europeans? I mean, even from a conservative viewpoint, it doesn't make any sense. Some stuff on the Australian points-based system, you can look that up for yourself. It doesn't work particularly well. Integration and open... Fuck off. I can't do it. I can't do it. Tighter restrictions on people who do come here from the EU. So having to wait 5 years before you can access unemployment, housing, child benefit and so on, which means reciprocally Brits living in Europe are likely to face the same kind of restrictions, which is not helpful. They want to charge people for use of the NHS, which means again there's going to be no reciprocity, which means if you have an accident abroad or whatever, you're going to end up paying. It's just so petty and shit. This in particular, the idea that you can unleash Britain's potential by narrowing its horizons and failing to invest in the country. And a lot of these ideas, right? Town centres are dead. They are not coming back in any way, shape or form of the way they used to be. The local council, Conservative-led, is pouring money into the town centre in Andover, even though most of it's shuttered up, right? You're not going to attract businesses back there in anything like the same degree. It's just not going to happen. Trying to forcibly regenerate town centres, it's going to do nothing, right? It's just throwing money away. If you want to get shops back into town centres, you need to cut the taxes there to the bone and the rents to the bone. Then you might get interesting shops, niche shops, places that offer experiences, things that will actually attract people there. But no, they want to throw good money after bad and try to turn back the clock and turn the high street back into what it used to be, when everything is much more about the internet. So, ironically, Labour's plan about rolling out broadband throughout the country and providing it free to everybody would go a lot further. And spending more money fixing the fucking roads would go a lot further as well than this bullshit. Again, I can't be asked. It's all so Middle England, it's Little England, sorry, so utterly middle class. A transport revolution. No. You're no fans of public transport. Don't pretend that you are. Talk about money to upgrade services, but it doesn't mean those services are going to be expanded. Say the railways need accountability, not nationalisation. Many of them cannot be profitable and have to keep being renationalised anyway, even with the Conservatives in charge. It's just nonsense. Absolute nonsense. Right. Labour's got its nostalgia for the 1970s, which is apparent throughout its manifesto. The Conservatives are apparently nostalgic for the 1930s because they want to restore a lot of the old railway lines that were removed under Dr. Beeching many moons ago. Look it up. So smaller towns and some villages and so on will have their rail lines restored. Well, who's going to run them? Because you also insist that the railways be profitable. And if you reopen these stations and run these lines out to there, that's a public service. It's not going to be profitable. Private companies aren't really going to want to do it. So why do it? If you renationalise the rail and the buses and other public transport, then it makes sense. But otherwise, not so much. We will launch the biggest ever pothole filling programme. Why are the roads in such a state? Because you've been underfunding it for so long. So again, that's filling in holes that they've created with a relative pittance. That's kind of the whole Conservative manifesto in a nutshell. Their ideas for helping people buy and rent are nonsense. They don't offer the solutions that will actually solve anything. They're not going to be able to deliver housing. We need more social housing without right to buy, so otherwise you're just treading water. Nonsense, gibberish. Yeah, when they talk about unleashing Britain's potential, what they actually seem to mean is turning us into a pound shop Singapore. So low taxation, low regulation, hellholes, basically, where the rich get very rich and the poor get nothing. So not all of this is pretty much bullshit, or has bigger, broader negative implications for our society. The idea, a fairer taxation system, that means shifting the burden more onto the poor people, and engaging in discredited trickle-down economics. Anti-tax evasion unit, oh yeah, that will be effective. You need laws to change. Yeah, this is all guidelines and ifs and buts. It's empty words. There's very little information on actual enforcement. It's just waffle, unfortunately. I'm sorry to say. We covered the problems with them trying to encourage innovation and so on. We've been through all that. Talked about fishing and rural communities and what the Conservatives have done to them, and how what they're suggesting won't actually make much difference, and how not very much of the population or the economy is really based in that anymore. When the Conservatives talk about environmentalism, they mean it more in a kind of not in my backyard, nothing unsightly. They're not actually talking about the environment as a whole. Strengthen our union is laughable because their policies are going to break up the union. Scotland is very likely to leave if we return a Conservative government. They seem to mostly be running on fear of Corbyn, which doesn't seem to make a great deal of sense to me. Protect our democracy. Jog on. Champion freedom of expression and tolerance, because you got such a good record on that, don't you? Section 28. Fuck me running. I can't do it. Cannot do it. Bullshit. Utter shit. I can't do it. I cannot be neutral. It's just lies. lies and a refusal to take responsibility for what they've done. Oh, we'll fill in the potholes we caused. That's the manifesto in a nutshell. Old Fat Punks is part caper, part comedy, part nostalgia, and part commentary. It follows three aging punks as they build themselves up for one big, nihilistic last hurrah. You can buy Old Fat Punks at Amazon, Drive-Thru Fiction, or Lulu.com. Follow the links below or search on those sites.